Hi there, welcome to Connecting in the Virtual Classroom. My name is Rusty May. I'll be your host today. I appreciate those of you who are joining us live online, as well as those of you that will be watching the recording or listening to the podcast later. I am a school counselor by trade, have spent the last 18 years in distance education, and when the pandemic struck, my first thought was to get involved in trying to help students and teachers remain connected as we worked through last spring, and now as the fall is approaching and is upon us, we are trying to figure out ways to connect with students, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. There is some good news that's out there right now about the pandemic and some of the things that we're seeing. We're seeing higher case numbers, but much lower um, intensive care needed treatments, much lower death rates and so forth. And so we are seeing some positives, but I know for all of us, it's still a challenging time. And today, I appreciate you joining us for a conversation to talk about how do we stay connected with these kids, and it's really important. We start the show every week by introducing ourselves. If you'd like, I'm going to give you an opportunity to unmute yourself. Teddy G is always there. See if Teddy's with us. Ted, you there?
Hey Rusty, good morning. Good day, everyone.
How are things going?
Things are going well. Just this past weekend, I work at SUNY Geneseo. It's a liberal arts university in upstate New York. They've recently just approved testing for student and staff to be done every 2 weeks. Not sure when it's going to start, but that's definitely a good indication for things to come. Unfortunately, one of the schools in upstate New York had to shut down and go remote because they saw a high infection rate. There was just too many students who were out partying, and they ended up having about over 100 positive cases, which I guess led them to find a way to have testing. But overall, things are at least heading the right direction. There's still some nerves in terms of how other universities are handling the pandemic, but overall, for the SUNY system, things are going well.
And how do you feel, and your staff and the people that you work with? Do people feel somewhat okay? Are they feeling positive about what's happening?
Well, prior to us reopening on August 31st, we already had a plan that we were going to limit the number of staff members in the building or in the library. And last week it went really well. We definitely was able to keep a distance from patrons, keep a distance from faculty, staff, students. We had our process. We had a routine of how we were going to quarantine books and have them back on the shelf for students to check out again. So for the library's part on campus, things are going well. Now, for the campus as a whole, we haven't seen many cases. I think one positive case so far. So that's definitely a good sign. But like I said, things can change. We just had Labor Day, so it's possible students might have went out, might have traveled. We're not sure yet. So I think maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll see how things are.
Okay. Thanks for being here as always.
Thank you.
Mr. Gutman, are you there? Would you like to join in?
Good
There you are.
morning.
How
Yeah,
are you?
thanks.
Welcome back.
Good. How are you? Yeah, thank you. I hope everybody's safe and healthy. Um, I'm the director of early childhood policy and systems at the Ideals Institute. We're in the School of Ed, and we mostly support early care and education programs throughout Maryland. We also work closely with the Maryland State Department of Education on quality initiatives. And we met last week with the dean of the School of Ed, and it sounds like from him, we're probably going to be virtual. It's probably through June of 2021. It sounds like it's moving more towards that. So anyway, thanks for having me. And I'm just always kind of looking to hear what's going on out there. It's unfortunately don't get to sort of, interact too much directly with the schools myself. So this has been one of the ways that I've been able to sort of hear what it's like on the ground. It helps better inform me how we might be able to support programs as well. So
Great.
thanks again.
Thanks for being with us. Is it Rahul? Rahul, would you like to introduce yourself?
You'll have to, okay, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Dr. Mehra. I'm based in Canyon City, which is close to Denver. And so from the point of view of introduction, I'm retired. I've been retired for about 12 years. I run a nonprofit. It's called Indian Health Alliance. So I don't teach in this country. I teach in India. I teach, right now I'm teaching sixth graders in India. And I only teach one topic, which is health. They have their curriculum in science, math, languages, but nobody teaches health. And so I have developed a full curriculum for sixth and seventh graders. I've written my books in English and they've been translated into Hindi. And I train the teachers in Delhi and I teach when I need to teach, but mainly I mentor the teachers on how to teach health. And I'm doing a scientific program. It was going to be a randomized controlled trial, but it's not going to be one, but it'll still be a pre-post study of the impact of the one-year health education curriculum in about, my goal was 500 students, but we ended up with 160 students in Delhi, India.
And so things in India, obviously there's a spike in cases, but it seems that the mortality rates are completely different. How are the students responding to the online situation?
Well, it depends upon the socioeconomic status. So the kids who are reasonably well off, and right now that is my target population because the poor kids don't have access to technology. So I'm doing the program in a school which is a private school, and kids are reasonably well off and they have access. The kids are loving it. I see them, even if I don't teach, I'm observing the teacher teach. The kids are very engaged. And the school has a counselor so that when the kids need some help, the parent can reach out to the counselor for any mental or social health issues. But from what I've observed, the attendance is not 100%. You do get dropouts, but otherwise the kids are very engaged. And as a part of my program, I require two things. One is 40 hours of health education in a year. Otherwise, I will not run my program. The second is I have to engage with the parents of the kids that I'm teaching for 1 hour a month.
Okay. Well, that's fantastic. It sounds like a really a wonderful program. I look forward to hearing how it turns out. Thank you for being with us. I hope you'll join the conversation as we go forward today.
Thank you, Rusty.
Vindago? Did I pronounce that right? Vindago? Hello?
You can call me Govinda by my name.
Gobinda. Okay.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm a school teacher from Nepal. So, right, this time we are not able to go to school because of the pandemic. So, I teach in a government school near the capital. It's in rural area near the capital, Kathmandu. Our students do not have much access to the internet and other tech devices. So we don't reach all the students through online. So I teach, some of them using modern technology, but all students are not able to get access to it. So the situation here is not so good to the part of the students. So we are trying to access them through different medias, different way. Person-to-person teachers who live nearby, they can visit them,
right,
and to give them some instructions for their, continuous education. And some students who have access, they can be in touch with their teachers through Zoom meetings or Zoom or other ways of technology. It has been more than 6 months, so we haven't seen the students face to face. So the time has been really difficult for all.
Yes. Well, thank you for
And
being with us
I
today.
teach, sorry?
I said thank you for being with us today. I hope you'll share more as
It's
we
my
go along.
pleasure. I'm really interested in this topic, actually, online education. So I'm trying my best, who has got access, uh, to teach the students.
Okay.
So I
Thank
teach
you.
in a middle school.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so
Thank you.
I'm really happy to be here.
Pedro, are you there? Would you like to introduce yourself? All right, Pedro, if you want to put a note in the chat, you can introduce yourself to us that way if you'd like. Jay Target, is that correct? Are you there? Oh, not there anymore. Okay, well, we're going to get started and go forward. I'm going to share my screen with you, and this was a slide that I found today that I find particularly disturbing. We've been hearing about the disparity of the disease from a health standpoint on different populations, but now we're starting to see the effects of of what's going on in the schools on the population and the student participation. Several of you mentioned that as we started out, but this slide is incredibly sobering. If you just take a minute to look at it, I know the quality isn't quite where I'd like it to be, but this was done by zip codes based on economic situations. And you can see when the pandemic kicked in, and you can see the participation rates almost immediately for everyone. They sort of fell off the edge. This was for math classes. And so you saw, a particular fall in almost all the categories, although the greatest fall was in the lower income zip code areas, and where we saw some getting back to the middle income, started to see them come back as we got towards the end of the school year. You actually saw an increase in the participation rates in the top zip codes, the top economic zip codes. And when you look at this slide, it becomes incredibly apparent not only in the United States, but in India and Nepal, wherever you're visiting us from today, that this pandemic, the effects of this pandemic are going to be significantly more devastating to the learning accomplishments and the learning abilities of those who are in the lower economic strata. And again, we know from everything that we're seeing from the economic data, especially in Europe and in the United States, about the loss of positions and loss of jobs. But what you've mentioned here today, really not having the access to be able to join into the online classes, and also probably just not the ability to participate, even if they do have some technology. If they have some technology available, if they have a parent that may have a laptop or a phone, the ability for them to get access to that phone, the ability for them to use that phone or that laptop for an extended period of time. We know that the access to Wi-Fi and the internet is very challenged. We have people in the United States telling stories of many individuals who are going to libraries, parking outside of libraries, parking outside of fast food places, parking outside of just about anywhere that has Wi-Fi in an attempt to get something done. But again, that's not a long-term strategy if you're a young child, if you're in the K-12 environment. To be able to get access to that sort of thing is incredibly difficult. And as the weather gets more challenging in different parts of the world, the Northern Hemisphere specifically, over the next few months, that option is not going to be there. So when I look at this slide, and I'd like to get some feedback from those of you that are with us today, I'm going to stop the share. This show is about participation. This isn't about me sharing information. I'd like to hear what you think when you take a look at that slide. Mr. Gutman, can I start with you?
Sure. I mean, was still kind of processing, but clearly this is this is an area that we've been looking at also in early childhood, and actually I'm presenting on Friday at a conference of the National Registry Alliance that looks at the workforce in early care and education, and that's been one of the concerns in terms of the equitable access. It seems to be a continuing theme, especially even with programs like Head Start, where you're serving children, that are in poverty. There's really big concerns about either access to the technology, access to just the bandwidth, the broadband, and then with programs like that as well, some of the what I call the poorest of the poor in Head Start are the American Indian Head Start programs and the migrant and seasonal Head Start programs. And a lot of those areas are just isolated. There's no, there's no access to internet. So there's just some really deep and broad access issues within the early care and education community. And then also, again, because that's the age group that I'm in, you talk about the range of family child care, and that access going away, or if that was the place that children were getting care, a lot of family child care providers are not in the same position to provide remote types of learning experiences, virtual experiences that even a center or a public school pre-K program would offer.
Yeah. Dr. Mehra, your thoughts on that? I imagine it's probably similar in India. Can I get you on mute?
Yes, no, exactly the same. And obviously, when I looked at that graph, the first thought that came to mind is whether they broke the data out into people who didn't attend because of access of technology versus other variables. And again, in India, what I find, at least in the public schools, things are pretty bad. A lot of the kids don't have access to technology. So they're using their cell phones, and even one household may only have one cell phone, and they're trying their best to use that, assuming they have access to the internet. And then the other is the part that I'm dealing with, because I've decided only to do the program in a private school, because otherwise there's not much that can be done. There, everybody has access to technology. At least this is a upper middle class private school. And there the attendance is pretty much based on student interest, what's going on during that time when the class is being held. And even there, I see 70%, 60% attendance. So it allows me to peel the two variables out that, yes, technology is a huge issue, but even with technology, I'm not sure every child or every parent is putting the priority on what's going on in the school.
Thank you. I agree with you 100%. Really what this show's about today in the terms of the absolute necessity to connect immediately with as many students as possible, because the fallout of this has as much to do with the lack of a feeling of connection and community within the classroom as it does with the technology. And I believe that's kind of what you were getting to, is that there is a real sense that this isn't important, or that they don't feel important. And a lot of kids in the United States specifically struggle with that. And so I think that's really what we wanted to talk about today, more so than the technology piece. Teddy, what did you think about that graph?
It was interesting to say the least, but it really just goes to show the, I guess, income inequality that's in this country. I know growing up in the Bronx, my parents were really honed on going to the library, getting your work done there. And for a lot of people, having Wi-Fi, having a either desktop or a laptop, it's not everybody has that luxury of having technology in their home. And when you look at a lot of countries in Africa, Middle East, even Asia, they're more advanced in terms of having this sort of equipment at home. And for the US, yes, we may see sales from Best Buy, from different companies, but people have to prioritize, do I buy food for my children or do I have to pay the internet bill?
Yeah.
And if you look at how we are just raving about Zoom, Google Hangout, all these technological softwares that we think are going to benefit our children, we forget that a lot of stuff comes with a price. Yeah, Zoom is free, but the internet to access Zoom may not be for a lot of people. And to tell someone, hey, you have to pay $70 a month in this country, that may be a lot to ask for. So we really have to look at the income inequality that comes along with this.
Absolutely. And so I want to invite Elizabeth, if you're there, if you'd like to introduce yourself, I'll unmute you. We're just kind of having a conversation talking about some of the fallout from what's happening so far. If you don't want to jump in on your mic, you can send us a note in the chat and tell us a little bit about yourself. Or Kamal, is Kamal there? Would you like to say hello and tell us where you're from? Hello?
Hello, everybody. I have just joined you. I'm happy to be with you, but I need time to hear more, and then I can comment. Thank you.
All right. So we are looking at, we were sharing the screen and talking about the situation that we're dealing with. And I think for a lot of us, we think about the reality of, you know, the technology reality, which we've all mentioned, and you've all made good points there. I think the important thing to think about as well, though, and especially in the first couple weeks of school, is the real necessity for us to get to where these kids are right now. And I've shown this slide every time that we've done the show for the past since March, in talking about the idea of grief and loss and trying to figure out, because this next couple of weeks, I know in the beginning, especially in early childhood education, Mr. Gutman could probably speak to the idea of relationship development in the first couple of weeks of school in the K-6, K-12 environment. We spend a lot of time and energy working on those relationships in the first couple of weeks of school, and then hopefully develop enough of a connection with the kid or enough knowledge about the kid to be able to teach them effectively. But if that doesn't happen in the first few weeks of school, those kids are often the ones who struggle. And what we're seeing in these participation rates from the previous slide, this is very obvious because you can break it out according to who comes to a Zoom meeting. But when you talk about being checked out, this could easily relate to kids who are actually physically in class, but aren't paying a bit of attention to what the teacher is saying. We could have the exact same statistical data if you were to look at kids in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. I read a study several years ago that talked about when kids start to feel disconnected to school between 2nd and 3rd grade, they start to feel like it just isn't for them, or the teacher doesn't really understand them, or that the work isn't really relating to what they're all about. And this whole idea of trying to relate to these kids in the face-to-face classroom is absolutely critical to any kind of success in the elementary and high school environment. But then when you start thinking about it from an online perspective, and you start thinking about what they've been through over the last 6 months, what their parents have been through, the situations that they've been in, these next few weeks are absolutely pivotal. And for me, one of the things that I'm frustrated with, and I'd like to stop the share again and ask Mr. Gutman, if he's there, to talk about the idea from a legislative standpoint. Are people talking about the idea that you know, we really need to focus on this, or is everybody just focused on, we got to get back to education?
So first, you're going to have to call me Alan, because if I hear Mr. Gutman, I feel like I'm in trouble or something.
All right.
That's something wrong. So Rusty, you can feel free to call me Alan. And if I understand your question correctly, and I'm not quite sure. I mean, I saw in the synopsis for today, kind of talking about relationships, and that's kind of one of the things that we've also just been looking at in terms of just teaching that's culturally responsive, and just the idea that if the relationship is not there, you're going to have a hard time having students really have positive learning experiences. So and I'm sorry I missed the piece or didn't understand the piece relating it to legislation or not legislation. But all I know is I think, well, I'll let you explain that. I'll be quiet for a second.
Everything that I'm reading that's coming down, even from the Department of Education and across the states and so forth, are all the guidelines about reopening and what strategies we have to take and the learning loss and all these kinds of things. But very little is being said within the educational community as far as I can read. Not the educational community where it's teachers or people who are actually boots on the ground, but in the people who are making educational decisions when it's financial or those kinds of things. They are not talking about the importance of the SEL part of it, the social emotional literacy, the talking about the trauma that these kids have been through. They're basically just saying, look, we got to get these kids back to school. They need each other. We got to get parents back to work. They need the money. And we just got to, just keep moving forward with the education because we've already lost so much.
Yeah, so now I got you. And you're kind of preaching to the choir with me here. And this is where there's always been talk in my field for the 30, 40 years that I've been working with children birth to 5, the trickle down concepts coming from K-12. I've always kind of been one that feels like there's just a tremendous need for the push up from birth to 5, that we have a lot to teach. So, when you talk about social emotional learning, that's core to what, it's central to what happens with young children. And we feel like we've been trying to push that up. And it does seem like at least it's pushing up into K1, 2, and 3 a little bit more. I mean, they really look at early childhood now as as birth through 3rd grade. So I think there is this realization. And when I'm reading this book now by Zaretta Hammond on culturally responsive teaching, I would say 3/4 of her book is really focused on this kind of, the development and looking at socially and emotionally what's going on and physically what's going on inside the students in order to help them better learn. So for teachers, we need to now, more than any time ever, look at how do we connect, how do we create that social emotional connection with students, with children in a virtual space, let alone, in a classroom.
Right. All right, thank you. I'm going to go through the slide presentation, and then I want to come back to you guys and open this up so that we can have a conversation about this, because that's just really what this show is about, is talking to educators and getting your points of view. I love to hear what people have to say, and I know the people that listen to the recordings and so forth are interested in your expertise. This for me is a passion that I really appreciate, but it's also something that I know I don't have any kind of a cornerstone on. This is really something that a lot of you have done. To get started, we always want to talk to educators about this, and I would encourage all of us to think about how this thing has affected us as educators, as doctors, as people who are involved in the legislative side. We need to really be aware. I had a long, drawn-out conversation with my wife about 3 weeks ago where I really had begun to realize that I had become significantly depressed over the last 6 months. And I really didn't notice it. I was going through my work. I was doing my thing. I wasn't really taking care of myself the way that I wanted to. And my temper was a little shorter and so forth. And it wasn't until I had a couple days to myself. My family went away for a couple of days, and I had a couple of days to myself that I really realized just how much this has impacted me. I moved to a new country last year. I live in Portugal. I'm new to a country. I'm new to a language. And being by myself away from my home country, seeing all the things that are happening in my home country of the United States around the COVID-19, it really had gotten to me. And I'm surprised because I've been talking about this every week, and I think all of us are probably out there talking to people and trying to help them. But it's important that we take a moment to think about ourselves and to think about some of the ways that we're trying to take care of ourselves as we move forward, regardless of how we're incorporated in all this. What Alan said just a minute ago, I think, is really important. And this is, I believe, and I wish was coming from all the departments of educations around the world, and from UNICEF and from, the HWO and so forth, is talking about how we are the needs of schools and the needs of students right now. And for me, at least in the first month of September, and the educational loss and all that being what it is, it's already there. And the reality of the fact that this pandemic is going to change how the education environment and how the work environment looks for, we don't have any idea how long. This first 2 to 3 months of school this year needs to be about connecting with these kids and finding ways to get their participation rates up. If we need to go to local agencies to get equipment, if we need to find ways to get internet, if we need to find hotspots and doing things, where is the money coming from? Where is the money going to come from to support these kinds of things? But the idea that the needs of schools right now is so different than it has ever been in the history of education, at least in my mind, at least in our country. Now, this may not be true in other countries, but in the country of the United States, and I think it's probably pretty similar to other countries as well, this is a very unique situation. So we have to think about that in terms of how we are preparing, what we're preparing for, what we're looking for. And some of the ideas that I came across this week in preparing for the conversation today were some things that I feel are really important, things that organizations can do, whether it be remotely. Dr. Morrow talking about doing work with those 149 students. If they're able to connect a caring adult with each one of those students, now obviously he's speaking to a group of kids who seem to be rather affluent, but that doesn't mean that they haven't lost a significant amount as well. But this idea of finding within your organization all of the adults taking responsibility for a certain number of students and really making an effort to connect with them so that each student within the environment, obviously for Teddy at the university level, this is going to be more challenging. But again, if you thought about doing that with all of the employees at the university level and those people, adjunct professors and people like that, making a concerted effort to connect with all of their students. And it doesn't have to be anything significant, but it could be a way for all of us to really acknowledge with our students, okay, we're all in this together, and to be talking with them on a weekly basis and trying to mentor them and to just have a conversation with them, just get a feel for where they're at. If we can set up these programs, if we can talk to our administration and get them thinking about this kind of thing, how can we use, we hear from teachers every week about how anxious they are. They feel like they're not able to help their students, and they're, when they go into their Zoom classrooms and they see the homes that they live in and so forth, all that is great. But now we have to think about solutions, because we're not going to be able to get through this. We can't continue to focus on what's not available to us. Now's the time for solutions. And so these are some of the things we can be talking to them about, finding out what's going on with them. Daily or weekly check-ins, absolutely critical. And whether it's just even in your Zoom classes or whatever it happened to be, starting off with a quick emoji check-in, a quick check-in to find out, playing a game, Thorns and Roses, talking about something good and something not so good. I personally like the good more than I like the not so good, but I think right now it's important to acknowledge some of the challenges that the students are facing. And this is really easy to do, both online. You can do it in person. You can have the kids check in, giving a number sign or something on the screen, but you can also do this in Google Forms. It's very easy to set up these sorts of things, and you can send it not only to the children, but you can also send it to the family. You might send it on a Monday morning or a Friday afternoon and talk to the family, getting a sense of who those kids are, how they're feeling, and so forth. So daily and weekly check-ins right now, I would say it's got to be daily, at least for the first month or so, until we get into a routine. This is not like a regular year. You can't just do this. Well, we have teachers all the time. That's one of the things that I do when the face-to-face schools are around, is do teacher trainings on that honeymoon period that we all get into, where we're really connecting with kids for the first 2 weeks, and then it's curriculum. And by Christmas time, all the good work that we put in the first few weeks is gone. So these kinds of things are essential in the face-to-face classroom, and they're, I don't know what the other word is, but ultra essential in a virtual classroom and talking to them. An idea that I saw today that I thought was incredible was making a classroom playlist, having something simple like that where you can connect with the kids. This can be at the college level, anywhere like that. The songs can be sent in anonymously. You can play it, have the kids get access to it on Spotify or SoundCloud, one of those things that you can do. But have kids kind of connect around their own favorite music and talking about some of the things. You can use the playlist in the virtual classroom too. In the background, we certainly do that in the face-to-face classroom if we have kids working independently and we're still with them and we're online, but we're playing some of the music for them in the background is a fantastic idea. Creating peer connections, figuring out ways to get kids connected to kids, setting up buddy programs, buddy systems. Every student in the class has a buddy and their responsibility is to check in with each other once a week. You can write up some questions, you can give them some conversation topics, ask them to give you feedback about what's going on. Obviously, in situations like that, we have to remind the students of personal privacy to try to continue to protect kids in the virtual world and to not be letting kids in. But the way that we connect people together, we have them working together, but we can also just set them up for something outside of the classroom in the peer connection environment. When we're in the classroom, the virtual classroom, some really great ways of connecting in the classroom, using discussion forums. We all have those in our LMS systems. We are able to do that. We can create and rethinking about our teaching, less talking, more doing, more relatable activities, activities that relate to where kids are, understanding what they have available to them and the kinds of things they can do. Using Flipgrid and other places like that to get kids onto video to respond to questions and so forth. Kids love video. They love taking pictures of themselves. They love using Flipgrid and getting on there and doing a quick response, changing up the way that they're responding, and all the time that you're always taking part in the conversation. You're there, you're interacting, you're not there as the moderator as much as you're there as a participant, because we got to get everybody in the same team. We got to get everybody together. Obviously, our job is to lead, but we have to get everyone working in the same direction as we work through this next couple of months. Connecting out of the classroom, creating student lounge. In Zoom, obviously, you can create breakout groups, but there might be a lounge that's open 30 minutes before your normal office time, so kids can come in if they want to do that. The way that you set up your group work, having kids work together, taking different parts of activity and interacting with each other, setting up breakout rooms for them to work together during your online classes. You can pop in and out and be able to see what's going on. And then have them using technology, a variety of ways of communicating with each other. This is a great opportunity right now to teach kids more and more about how to use technology effectively. And continue with the positive conversation. Obviously, we want to meet face to face. Obviously, we miss our friends, but here are some options. Here are some things you can do. Here are some ways that you can work these things out. So these are some of the ideas that I feel, and as we look at this original chart, for those of you who have just joined us, the participation rates are truly challenging to look at from the socioeconomic point of view. But in my opinion, and where I'm coming from, what Alan said previously, I think the idea right now, and what I'd like to hear from you, if you have something to share with us, and Dr. Mora, I think I'd like to start with you, if you don't mind, finding out what the feeling is in India when it comes to this idea of really connecting with the kids.
Thank you, Rusty. I think what I found critical, again, I've not been doing this for too long a time. This is a pretty new program. We started in July, is that talking to the parents. So initially, the school was hesitant, saying, why do you want to talk to the parents of the kids? And I said, because this is my only way of communicating with an adult who's interacting with the child. And after a little bit of a push, they agreed to it. And now I think that has become probably the most important component. So as I mentioned, I talk to the parents of these children that are in the curriculum 1 hour a month. So they don't, and again, it's voluntary. Of course, they don't, but last time I had 92 parents on the Zoom out of 130 or something, which is, I would say, on a Saturday morning. And I think that is, to me, the most important thing. Talk to them about the issues you brought up, Rusty, feeling safe at home. And I also talk to them about COVID-19. And the parents said, why don't you give a lecture on COVID-19 to the kids? So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I talked to them. It was a 1-hour lecture on infectious diseases and specifically about COVID-19 to alleviate any concerns they have. So to me, I guess there's one thing that I've learned probably more than anything else is that during these times, parent engagement is key. And next month, I'll be talking about nutrition. I always start off with, let me hear what are your issues? What challenges are you facing? But after we spend about 10, 15 minutes on that, then we get into a topic. And nutrition obviously is a big one. So it's a learning, it's a journey for me. And I'd love to hear other folks comment on that. Thank you.
Teddy, what do you think about that? I know you got college kids, but what do you think when you hear that kind of stuff about that connection piece?
I think it's very helpful. I know when the pandemic started, I reached out to a lot of my students via email. And as we opened the semester, I've actually been able to talk to them as they work their shifts and just hearing how their summer was going, things they had to deal with and overcome obstacles. One of my students actually was able to get a job throughout the pandemic. One of my students, a lot of his family members really got hit hard with COVID-19. But just having that channel of communication, I think, goes a long way. Sometimes a lot of students don't want to open up, but a simple hi, how are you, how's it going? You definitely get a lot more out of them than just a simple hi, do this, do that during your shift. And I try to make it a point to at least talk to every student during the shift, because not only are they dealing with a pandemic, but they're dealing with their academics as well. And it's not going to be easy semester in terms of having to follow the guidelines, follow the rules, and also work and be a student as well. But if you can at least allow them to open up or at least hear what they have to say, it definitely goes a long way clearing their mind and helping their mental mindset.
Thanks, Teddy. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that if any of you, Jonathan, Brian, Jim, Elizabeth, Kamal, Katie, Jeanette, please raise your hand. I'd like to hear what you have to say on these issues. That's what this show's about. It's an open forum. It's not, it's about talking, and there's just to hear your feedback. But this idea right now is that as leaders, as adults, and oftentimes as the most caring probably adult in a lot of the lives of the kids who are most at risk, our ability to lead by example, our ability to be able to share and to communicate is really critical to these kids. And it could be the only, if their parents are struggling and stressed out and trying to deal with all this stuff, there may be a situation where they need to talk to someone, and they may not be that interested at first or whatever, but we have got to continue that conversation. Brian, are you getting on? Do you have something you'd like to share? Oh, got Brian's hand. Yeah.
Yeah, I joined late, so I may be repeating things that people have already said. But I teach at an elementary school, and the one thing that I've noticed is that I didn't really anticipate it, but since March we've taught kids to be afraid of people, and I've seen it on campus. The kids are extremely anxious. They've been traumatized. Some of them. Not all of them, but some of them have. And so I'm glad to get the affirmation here, because this is exactly what I told teachers, is to just, go easy on the academics until you can get everyone feeling good. And so we're on campus, but we also have some kids who are learning from home. And that's turned out to be a challenge. But our teachers are checking in weekly with parents. They have a Zoom call once a week with parents just to see how everything's going, because we don't have the same interaction with parents that we used to, because they're not allowed on campus.
Right.
So it's the communication part has been really, I think, important. This is our third week, and I think it's really helped us calm everyone down and keep it together.
And now, are you a principal administrator?
I'm a principal, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's an elementary school?
Yeah, we start with 3-year-olds and go up to 5th grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what sort of things do you see the teachers, how are they trying to connect with the kids? How are they trying to create that relationship piece that we're talking about?
You know, a lot of what they're doing is playing. They're going outside and playing because the weather's been good and the kids can take their masks off if they, you know, if they're distant outside, and taking walks to the park. We have a park nearby. And then just, you know, some of the same things that they traditionally do, you know, the first 6 weeks of school in terms of creating community. Some of that works in this environment and some of it doesn't, but they, you know, mostly they're just trying to take a relaxed approach to the first few weeks and get kids, you know, trying to get kids to make connections to each other. So, you know, extra recess is a big one because that's when the kids can get out and play with each other.
Well, thank you very much. It's refreshing to hear that from an administrative point of view, because I know I've talked to a number of administrators who feel some pressure from either district offices or wherever it's coming from about this idea of getting back the curriculum and right away. And it sounds like you're really facilitating that environment where these connections can take place. So thanks for what you're doing.
I think the other thing to remember is, you know, what I've been talking to teachers about. A couple of them are stressed out because they're teaching in their classroom, but then they have kids that are streaming from home, you know, and they're trying to do both things well. And, you know, and I've just said, look, we're built for in-person learning. That's what we do at this school. So we're going to do the best we can, but don't put it on yourself to be able to fully recreate your classroom online, because it's not possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to do it for adult education perspectives, and so, you know, the idea that you'd be able to do that in a virtual classroom in a K-5 environment or pre-K-5 environment it's too much pressure, and that's what happens to educators because they care so much. They want to connect with all the kids. They get upset when their participation numbers are low online, or if the kids don't come to school a couple of days or whatever it is, and they start getting burnt out by it. And that, you know, my biggest concern is that, and I don't know if you've heard anything from your staff, but is that there is a growing sense that there are a lot of teachers that are seriously planning on leaving the profession this year. They didn't leave immediately because there wasn't any place to go to, but the feeling is that there is a real thought that there are a number of teachers who are thinking if they have any options available to them that they're going to do that. Do you have a sense on your campus that that's the case?
No, I have, you know, one teacher who says that, you know, it's been 3 weeks and she's already burnt out, you know, and you know, it's going to be my challenge to try to rejuvenate her. But she's a perfectionist, and that's why she's burnt out.
Right.
But I don't have the sense that anyone's going to leave teaching. For the most part, they were happy to still have a job because we weren't able to bring everybody back. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate what you're doing. Kamal, let's see if we can get you unmuted. Thank you for raising your hand. Jim, I'd like to hear from you too. I'm very interested about the indigenous community that you work with. Kamal?
Yes, thank you. I'm to talk about something related to my contest. I work in Jordan for UNRWA as inclusive education advisors, and I have my experience related to the students in 5 fields: Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, West Bank, and Gaza. Other contests than others talking about, but here I'm talk about 2 points. The first point related to the digital exclusion.
Yeah.
Which means that not all the students can reach to the internet or the technology because of the lack of resources, or sometimes because the infrastructure is not suitable, is not prepared for these crises.
Right.
This is very, very big issue there. And even if the government pretend that we can reach to the 70 or 80% of the students, but the fact is not 70 or 70, maybe less than 40 can be reached to the internet and the technology access. The other point related to the psychosocial support during the crisis, during the COVID outbreak. I'm talking here about some responses we did for the students. We can talk about care calls, we can talk about about individual sessions by using Zoom or Microsoft Teams or something like this, or group counseling also. We can talk about some materials. We produce materials for teachers and for students. For teachers and counselors, we produced manuals how to deal with students and related in psychosocial support online or by phone or other modality, not face-to-face. And we used, and the counselor used the available resources from social media or WhatsApp or like this.
Okay.
This is the modality, but this is not a stable system. This is not a systemized way of responding.
Okay.
The other point related to the students, we produce home-based activities and games and enable the students to play with their sister or brothers, father, mother, inside the houses.
Okay.
And we succeeded to keep them on learning in the calm situation and in well-being.
Okay.
We don't have indicators to do this, and this is our problem now: how to collect statistics, data, if we succeeded fully or not, or how much can we succeed in the future, because the new wave of the coronavirus is spread there in the Middle East.
Well, thank you for all you're doing. And I think the important thing right now is for all of us to redefine the word success. So I'm going to jump to Jim real quick and think what he's going to talk about his point with the indigenous folks that he works with. Hi, Jim.
Hi there. I was just checking my email early this morning and discovered this fascinating topic was up. So I joined you guys a bit late, but it just really appealed to me, the idea that someone's talking about fostering relationships, because I find we are so caught up in the technicalities and the pedagogy of trying to put a course online. And it really is taking a lot of resources. We're just a small college, and I work in I'm the only employee in the Satellite Learning Center in my community, and working with others kind of in the same situation. So the resources aren't there. We don't have instructional designers on staff. A few of us have graduate degrees that have touched on that. But so we're so immersed in this whole idea of trying to get something on that will work, and is it going to, promote learning, and is it going to be workable from a technological standpoint? And I think it's easy to lose sight of this idea of creating relationships in the classroom, because I think unless people feel comfortable there, they're just going to check out. So I'm more interested in hearing what the rest of you have to say. In my face-to-face classroom back in January, how many years ago was January?
Yeah.
I started the class with all the chairs pushed aside. I put a blanket on the floor, and we had some fried chicken for breakfast is what I could do. And we sat down and we ate together. And it just set the tone for the rest of that whole class. I teach a lot of short 6 to 8 week, basically literacy and essential skills courses focused on an area of employment. And that one happened to be early learning and childcare. And a number of the students in that have gone on to a diploma program at our main campus. But I just, how do you do, what do we do to form that relationship? I love the way and I think I've seen it on Twitter too, prioritizing care over content.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do those connections? What are some of the techniques that others use to foster those connections and make people feel comfortable? It's okay to take some time. We don't have to go right into the content immediately.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm gonna go to Alan real quick and see if he's got any feedback from the field about what teachers are trying to do in the birth to 5 arena in terms of trying to create those relationships. Are you hearing anything about what seems to be working for your group?
So I'm gonna have to say no. I'm not. So I know it. this is not going to be on the topic, but it is what's topical in the birth to five world, which is that number one, the regulations have pushed down the ratios and the number of children that are allowed to be there, just like, has happened in just some general, restaurant spaces, things like that. However, the impact has really resulted in tremendous loss of income. So I'm just, I'm sorry, it's a little off topic, but that's where most of the stories that I'm hearing, and I'm also hearing about childcare providers that are going away and will not come back because they've been impacted and they can't afford to operate with smaller numbers of kids, and it's a tough space to operate in virtually. I've heard some places where it's working effectively. Actually, just heard yesterday, PBS Kids has been doing some tremendous kind of working in virtual space with some of their usual media, but they're also providing, I think, significant resources now for parents and educators that really kind of are good tools to help children and educators to work in a virtual world and yet provide kind of science and curiosity learning. So kind of good resource there.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry, I think I forgot what you told me your name was. Vindago. I'm sorry, I see your hand's been raised and I didn't notice it. Are you there?
Yes, I am Govinda.
Govinda.
My name is Govinda. Okay. So I just want to add some more things over here, what we have been doing during this pandemic and office school time. So when we cannot reach out our students face to face, we have been doing some works to engage the students. So we have TV channels to do the curriculums. Who have access to the internet, they can go to online classes with the teachers. And who don't have that access, we have TV programs, TV channels to teach the kids. And even if they don't have that TV channel, TV access also at home, we have some FM radios who are conducting teaching programs.
Wow.
And we make some YouTube videos for the kids too, so that they can download, their parents can download using some data or Wi-Fi from somewhere, and the kids can use that. And besides that, the most important thing is that, we are encouraging the parents to teach their kids some life skills, like gardening, cooking, and we are encouraging the parents to read for them. Actually, in normal time, our parents in the rural area, it's different in the city area, but in the rural area, most of the parents are very much engaged in farming. Most of our parents are farmers, so they don't have time with their kids. So, but in this period, so they also stay at home, mostly stay at home. So they can play with the kids, they can give some more time, and they can teach them, cooking, gardening, and other some life skills.
Right. All right.
And
thank you. Go
these
ahead.
are the things what we have been trying to encourage the parents of the kids, and sometimes we teachers also make some phone calls, to the parents and to the kids. That facilitates them a little bit to, from going depression.
All right.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. So anyone else that wants to jump in, we're getting close to the hour mark here. We've had a good opportunity to have some conversation. I would like to look, we did a show recently, Jim, when we were talking a little bit more about participation in the virtual classroom. And if I can find it really quickly on my completely messed up computer here, I will try to pop some of these ideas up here. In terms of connection and motivation, now obviously for me, I work more in the K-12 environment, although I think that, you know, college students, it's not significantly different in terms of that. But this was a meeting that we did a couple of weeks ago that had some additional stuff in here, and I'll share it with you so that you can maybe grab some tips. I would also say that one of the things that you don't want to be afraid of doing is having everybody bring their own lunch to a Zoom meeting and continue the process and just kind of try to make the Zoom meeting as personal as possible. But some of the things that we were talking about in the previous thing, talking to students, finding out as much as you can, what's going on with them, the connection before content, the one that you had, doing things to connect together, whatever the community is doing, trying to keep it light and fun, doing stuff with them on a regular basis. Obviously you don't have parents, but with the teachers, the most important thing, the first five, last five, having the right attitude, consistent routines, any kind of routine that you can put together so that they feel like that they're involved in something. And even with adult learners, I think that's important to remember. You know, obviously a lot of this is for students, more so in the K-12 environment, but that, you know, talking to them about what they're going through right now and some of the things that are there. These are all good tools. I do a daily, I've been doing this daily 1-minute video that talks social emotional literacy skills for kids for the last 18 years online. And they're just short little videos. Now they're all focused on doing things around the pandemic and so forth. So it's, you know, there's some ways in which you can get involved, but more than anything, I think it's really to bring yourself into the work that you're doing in terms of just continuing to do the same sorts of things that you were doing in the classroom. I've heard this from a lot of educators that, and obviously it's true that we can't replicate ourselves in the virtual classroom the way that we do in the face-to-face classroom, but bringing as much of ourselves and as much of who we were in that classroom into the virtual classroom is going to be helpful. So if anybody has any final thoughts, please raise your hand. I'm going to go to Teddy. I know Teddy usually's got some final words.
Thank you, Rusty. Thank you all for attending. I guess my final word is to just take care of yourself, but also try to find a bright side from all of this. I know it hasn't been easy, and it definitely won't be easy moving forward. I know my biggest concern now living in upstate New York is the flu season, which I just got my flu shot yesterday, but try to find some positivity out of this and try to help others when you can.
Thanks, Teddy. Anybody else have anything to say before we wrap up here today? Dr. Mora, any final thoughts? How about you, Brian? Any final words of positivity for everyone to take with them?
Well, what I did expect happened, and that is the kids brought the normal.
Right.
Once they got on campus, they were just kids again, and okay. But they're acting like kids, and it feels like school, and that's been very uplifting for me because it was a pretty depressing summer. But
well, I'm glad to hear that you guys are back face to face, and I really am. You know, it is hard to imagine that sort of thing. If there was any way it could possibly happen, I go more areas would be doing it, but I guess that's not realistic. But like you said, once the kids got back together, everything was okay, and then we could start working again.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Well, thank you all for being here today. We're here every Wednesday in the Connected Classroom, and I appreciate everything that you're doing, all the work that you're doing for the kids. You are really on the front lines right now in this fight against the pandemic, because the ones who are suffering, the ones who aren't sick, who are suffering the most are mostly the children and the families of those children who need their kids not only to be educated, but also to be in a school environment. And all the work that you're doing is so amazing and so appreciative. So thanks for all you're doing. Please take care of yourself and be safe and strong out there. Look forward to seeing you next week on the Connect.